2023, the year defined by the global fight against inflation. While we have not gone into the catastrophic worldwide recession like so many predicted, some countries have really struggled economically. These are the 5 worst economies of 2023. Number 5. Sri Lanka, the first of many nations which has suffered immensely since the pandemic. They are currently in a recession. Poverty is increasing, all while they are trying to escape a multi-year debt crisis. But their issues began way before COVID. The main problems stemmed from Sri Lanka's attitude towards trade. They wanted to transition to a rich, service-oriented economy, while only focusing production on self-improvement projects within its borders. So they imported way more than exported, or in other words, they spent way beyond their means. Their production was focused on domestic, non-tradable projects, so they were not earning any revenue from their output. To pay for this lack of revenue, they relied on loans from abroad with interest added to them. These loans were used in ways that did not contribute to their economy. They were mostly for infrastructure projects that, while improving the living standards for its people, did not bring any money in. Massive tax cuts the same year just worsened the situation, depriving the country of much needed funds. Eventually, after interest rates increased and the cycle of pointless production continued, Sri Lanka ran out of money and could not pay the interest back for their loans. The pandemic accelerated their debt crisis, causing them to run out of foreign exchange reserves. As a result, confidence plummeted, they lost access to international finance markets, and their currency depreciated by 81% against the US dollar in 2022. Fast forward to the present day, and their currency is still losing value. But the reason they are on this list is due to the lack of progress made over the year. The government's bizarre response to the crisis included a ban on fertilizers, aiming for 100% organic food production, which of course led to widespread crop failure, slashing production in half. As a result, imports are now relied upon even more, just worsening their trade imbalance. This year, despite inflation reducing from 50% to 4%, the economy has contracted a total of 8%. One of the worst figures in the world. Now, many international bodies are giving Sri Lanka loans to help rebuild their economy. For example, the IMF gave a $3 billion loan, which the government says will be used to repay its debts and restructure its economic model. No one knows if the government will succeed or just continue to misuse its funds, but confidence is not exactly high. Poor governance, restrictive trade, the inability to divert itself out of crisis without international help, and a looming economic anxiety have cemented Sri Lanka on this list. Number 4. Turkey. Turkey has a chronic inflation problem that has plagued their entire year. Despite raising interest rates by more than 30 percentage points only since June, inflation remains stubborn at a figure of around 62%. The interest rate will now increase to 42.5%, and inflation is not expected to peak until May next year. This is incredible considering Turkey is still the 17th largest economy in the world. How is it that such a large economy can fail so badly? Well, it can all be boiled down to years of bad decisions from the government, excessive imports leading to a deficit, stubbornly loose monetary policies, along with the inability to manage external shocks, caused investors to flee Turkey, hammering the Turkish lira. In 2018, $1 equaled 4 lira. Now, $1 equals 29 lira, meaning it has depreciated over 80% over the past few years. And the trend does not look like stopping. This has fueled inflation, increased the debt burden, and reduced the competitiveness of the export sector. The purchasing power and living standards for many ordinary people have eroded. Unemployment hovers around 10%, and uncertainty is on the menu for the foreseeable future. Such a bleak economic outlook, especially for an economy that should, in theory, be first world. Number 3, Venezuela. The main reason they are not lower on the list is because they have actually had a good year by their own standards, which admittedly are at rock bottom. Economic growth has increased by 15% and poverty is on the downslope. But this should not take away the fact that Venezuela remains by and large the worst economy in the world. Despite having one of the largest oil reserves worldwide, the poverty rate is around 90% of the population. We can identify the first problem straight away. Venezuela is, and always has been, completely dependent on a single commodity, oil. With petroleum accounting for over 95% of total exports, the state of its economy is completely centered around the health of that one market. When oil prices plummeted in the 80s, so did Venezuela, and it has never recovered. Since 2014, oil production declined sharply due to the mismanagement, corruption, and underinvestment of its state-owned oil company, as well as US sanctions. Venezuela's oil revenues dropped from $85 billion in 2013 to $4 billion in 2021, depriving the government of its main source of income and foreign exchange. They have been in a state of total economic collapse for a whole decade now. This is evident with mass unemployment, output decline, and you guessed it, hyperinflation, and a debt crisis. At its peak in 2018, inflation reached a whopping 80,000%, the same year they defaulted on their debt. This year, inflation has hovered around the 300% mark, which is a fine improvement, albeit entirely catastrophic. Their currency depreciates by 99.9% against the dollar every single year. Another unique fact about Venezuela is that 21% of its GDP is made up entirely by illegal activities, including organized crime and drug trafficking. It is truly a nightmare economy. But as previously mentioned, 2023 was not their worst year. Their president claimed a growth rate of 15%, thanks to the relaxation of currency controls, meaning more transactions using US dollars. This has provided the slimmest of hopes for Venezuelans, though there is growing concern that this will prove to just be a short-term temporary boost. In any case, Venezuela's status as a terrible economy remains safe, and they place third worst for 2023. Number 2, Argentina. Argentina has been all over the news lately, so much so that even I created a video on them. So much of the focus has been centered on the new president, Javier Milei, mainly because of his radical policy proposals. But if there was ever a time for radical economics, it would be now. Argentina is in deep, deep trouble. 2023 has been disastrous. The end result is an inflation rate of 160%. Is anyone else seeing a running trend here? Yes, inflation has ravaged most of the world this year, but some countries have simply been hit so much harder than others. Argentina is one of them, but they cannot deflect the blame elsewhere. Their mismanagement of the economy has wreaked havoc. They are now reaping the rewards. To cause inflation in the first place, the government followed a similar path to Sri Lanka, with spending exceeding tax revenues for far too long. The reliance on borrowing to finance this gap ballooned the national debt, which eventually became unsustainable, and you know the rest. In desperation, more money was printed, the currency lost all its value, and inflation spiraled out of control. Despite this occurring over years, the main negative effects are now being felt. 40% of Argentinians are living in poverty, 10% in extreme poverty. Their currency is worthless, and all confidence is lost in their system. It remains to be seen whether Milei's dollar-pegging policies will turn the economy around, but 2023 will forever be known as one of the worst in Argentinian economic history. Now here are the honourable mentions. These picks are developed nations, so they are not in as desperate trouble as the others on this list, but they have underperformed drastically this year, and so are deserving of a mention. The United Kingdom. Perhaps the worst performing developed nation. They are only expected to grow 0.5%, narrowly avoiding a recession, while the average growth rate for its contemporaries has returned to around 3 to 4%. There are many reasons for this. They are still yet to resolve the outstanding issues related to Brexit, including the loss of trade with European nations. Also, they were slow to follow the footsteps of the American Fed in increasing interest rates to reduce inflation following the outbreak of the Ukraine war. Germany, another nation affected by that Russian invasion. Their initial difficulties sprung from their reliance on Russian gas and oil imports. When these were cut off, they plunged into an energy crisis, with a sharp increase in prices affecting the poorest mostly. Supply chain issues and a political transition only worsened the situation as they looked to recover this year. As a result, their economy is expected to contract by 0.3%, with not much improvement expected next year. Ireland. Despite their immaculate reputation, Ireland has declined this year. They are facing a housing crisis, which has caused a shortage of affordable, quality housing and a surge in house prices and rents. The country's poorest have been affected the most, while their relaxed tax schemes continue to cause debate on whether to cater to the rich or provide for those in need. Also, Brexit has affected the sectors most exposed to the UK. Altogether, it has been a turbulent year for Ireland, but let us move on to the final spot on this list. Number 1, Lebanon, a small country in the Middle East with a population of about 6 million people. Lebanon has a rich heritage. However, they have been facing a severe economic crisis ever since 2019. Which has only gotten worse over time. The root of the problem is a lack of confidence in their currency, the Lebanese pound, kick-started by a liquidity crisis, but effects from the COVID pandemic, Beirut port explosion, and regional wars have all caused the pound to lose over 90% of its value. This has, of course, led to hyperinflation, which has been in triple digits for the past 3 years and currently stands at 230%. Their economy has contracted around 50% since the onset of the crisis, leading to poverty and a shortage of goods. Their public debt is also one of the highest in the world, and its banking system is currently insolvent. There seems to be no hope for Lebanon. Their main saving grace in recent years has been the tourism industry, which was predicted to help the country into growth this year. However, the nearby war in Gaza has put this to a swift end, with many countries advising against travel to Lebanon in the near future. They have no other industry to fall back on. As of this year, unemployment is up to 50%, its GDP per capita is less than half it was in 2018, and the poverty rate is predicted to exceed 60%. It is a failed state. Lebanon's economic situation is so dire that the World Bank has described it as one of the worst crises in modern history. Yes, many of its problems are just spillovers from previous years, but the situation has not improved in any way. Therefore, it deserves its place as the worst economy in the entire world, at least for this year. Thank you for watching. If you would like to see a list of the best economies of the year, please like and comment below.